power is rarely taken by force. It is surrendered quietly. Most people believe power belongs to the loudest voice, the fastest reaction, the strongest emotion. But Machiavelli, and the thinkers who came after him, understood something darker. Power belongs to the man who understands human behavior better than humans understand themselves. The 48 laws of power are not rules for domination. They are observations, cold, uncomfortable truths about how people actually behave when status, fear, and desire are involved. This video is not about becoming cruel. It is about becoming aware. Because the man who does not understand power is always subject to it. And the man who cannot see psychological games will always be playing one, without knowing it. In the next 90 minutes, we will break down the dark psychology beneath the 48 laws. Not as tactics, but as patterns. Watch carefully. Because once you see them, you cannot unsee them. Power is psychological before it is physical. Power does not begin with strength. That is the first illusion. Most people believe power comes from force, authority, wealth, intelligence, or position. They believe it is something that can be seized, proven, or displayed. This belief is comforting, because it makes power seem visible and measurable. But Machiavelli understood something far more unsettling. Power begins in the mind long before it ever appears in action. It exists first as perception. Before a man follows you, he must believe in you. Before a man fears you, he must sense something beneath the surface. Before a man obeys you, he must already have surrendered internally. This is why brute force fails so often. Force creates resistance. Psychology creates compliance. The 48 laws of power are not a manual for domination. They are a mirror, reflecting how humans behave when status, insecurity, desire, and fear collide. And the darkest truth they reveal is this: people respond less to reality than to how reality feels. They do not follow the strongest man. They follow the man who seems inevitable. They do not submit to logic. They submit to confidence, certainty, and emotional authority. This is uncomfortable to accept, because it means power is not fair. It is not moral. It is not evenly distributed to the most deserving. It flows toward those who understand psychology, and away from those who do not. Machiavelli observed this clearly in courts, kingdoms, and conflicts. But the pattern has not changed. Only the environment has. Today, power plays out in conversations, workplaces, relationships, and social hierarchies. The same laws operate quietly, invisibly, every day. And the man who does not understand them is not neutral. He is vulnerable. Because power dynamics exist whether you acknowledge them or not. Ignoring them does not make you virtuous, it makes you predictable. Predictability is weakness. This is the first dark psychological truth: you are always being perceived, evaluated, and positioned, often without a word being spoken. Before you speak, people read your posture. Before you act, they sense your emotional state. Before you argue, they already know who they believe holds authority. Power has often already been decided before logic ever enters the room. That is why explaining yourself rarely works. By the time you explain, the frame is already set. Machiavelli understood that the man who controls the frame controls the outcome. And frames are psychological, not physical. A frame is created by calm or urgency, confidence or hesitation, certainty or defensiveness. People respond instinctively to these signals. They do not analyze them, they feel them. This is why emotional discipline is the foundation of all power. A man who cannot regulate his inner state broadcasts instability. And instability invites challenge, manipulation, and disregard. A man who remains calm under pressure broadcasts something else entirely. He signals that he is not governed by the moment. This is deeply unsettling to others. Because humans rely on emotional cues to predict behavior. When those cues are absent or controlled, people lose leverage. They cannot rush you. They cannot guilt you. They cannot provoke you easily. This creates psychological imbalance. An imbalance shifts power. The 48 laws of power repeatedly return to this theme in different forms: silence, patience, reputation, timing, absence, restraint. All of these are expressions of the same principle. Power is the ability to remain internally stable while others become unstable. This is not cruelty. It is clarity. Because when emotions dominate, judgment collapses. Most people lose power not because they lack intelligence, but because they react. They react to disrespect. They react to fear. They react to praise. They react to pressure. Reaction hands control to the outside world. Machiavelli warned that men who allow themselves to be moved emotionally will always be moved strategically, by others. This is why so many laws focus on restraint. Not because restraint is passive, but because restraint preserves optionality. The calm man always has more options. When you react instantly, you lock yourself into a path. When you pause, you widen the field. This is the psychological advantage at the core of power. The world rewards those who can wait. Waiting allows others to reveal themselves. When you do not rush to speak, others fill the silence. When you do not rush to decide, others expose urgency. When you do not rush to defend, others overextend. Overextension is where power is lost. Machiavelli understood that men often defeat themselves when given enough time and rope. The calm observer simply watches. This is why power often looks effortless from the outside. People say, "He was lucky. He was always confident. He just had presence." But presence is not innate. It is trained. Presence is the result of internal order. A man with internal chaos cannot project authority. His words leak insecurity. His movements betray urgency. His decisions are reactive. A man with internal discipline moves differently. He does not need to dominate to be dominant. He does not need to speak to be heard. He does not need to threaten to be taken seriously. People feel his boundaries without them being announced. This is psychological power. And it is why the 48 laws are often misunderstood. They are not about tricks. They are about states of being. A man who understands these laws does not apply them mechanically. He embodies them. He becomes quieter, more deliberate, less reactive. Not because he is hiding, but because he has nothing to prove. This absence of need is what unsettles others. Neediness is visible. Confidence is felt. People sense when a man is trying to convince them of something, especially of his own worth. The moment you try to prove power, you reveal that you do not possess it. This is why Machiavelli emphasized appearances, but not in the shallow sense. Appearances are not about deception. They are about coherence. When a man's inner state aligns with his outer behavior, he becomes credible. Credibility creates influence. Influence creates power. The man who lacks this alignment overcompensates. He speaks too much. He reacts too quickly. He explains too often. He seeks validation unconsciously. These behaviors betray internal instability. And instability is always exploited, sometimes consciously, often instinctively. The 48 laws of power exist because humans are not purely rational. We are emotional, hierarchical, status-aware creatures. We read dominance the way animals do, through signals, not arguments. Calm posture. Measured speech. Emotional neutrality. Controlled timing. These are not tricks. They are signals. And signals determine how others treat you long before facts matter. This is why power is psychological before it is physical. Before force is applied, it is imagined. Before authority is obeyed, it is accepted. Before leadership is followed, it is felt. Machiavelli simply named what others preferred to ignore. That power flows toward those who understand human nature as it is, not as it should be. And the darkest truth of all? Most people do not want power, but they submit to it instinctively. They follow certainty. They respect calm. They obey confidence. Not because they are weak, but because this is how humans survive in groups. The man who understands this does not become cruel. He becomes aware. And awareness is the first defense against being controlled. Because once you see power psychologically, you stop chasing it physically. You stop arguing. You stop explaining. You stop reacting. You begin observing. And observation is where real power begins. This chapter is not about becoming dominant. It is about no longer being dominated unconsciously. Once you understand that power begins in perception, everything changes. You move slower. You speak less. You choose more carefully. And slowly, without force, without noise, you begin to shift how the world responds to you. That is the foundation. Everything else in the 48 laws builds on this truth. The moment you explain, you lose power. Most men believe explanation is strength. They believe that if they clarify their intentions clearly enough, defend their decisions rationally enough, and justify their actions thoroughly enough, others will understand and respect them. This belief is comforting. It suggests that power belongs to the most reasonable, the most articulate, the most transparent. Machiavelli understood the opposite. Explanation is not neutral. It is a signal. And the signal it sends is rarely the one you intend. The moment you begin explaining yourself, you are no longer leading the interaction, you are responding to it. You are no longer setting the frame, you are operating inside someone else's. That shift is subtle, but decisive. Because power is not about being correct. It is about who decides what needs justification. When you explain, you silently accept the premise that you owe clarity, permission, or validation. Even when your explanation is logical, measured, and polite, the psychological damage has already occurred. You have acknowledged that your position is questionable. And once doubt enters, authority leaks. This is why explanations feel necessary to the insecure and unnecessary to the powerful. A king does not explain his decree to the crowd. A leader does not justify every decision to his followers. A calm man does not defend his composure to an anxious room. Their silence does the work. Machiavelli observed this repeatedly. Those at the top rarely overcommunicate, while those below constantly explain themselves upward. This is not coincidence. Explanation is a behavior of subordination. It arises from fear of being misunderstood, rejected, or challenged. But fear, once revealed, invites pressure. When you explain yourself, you reveal what matters to you. You show where you feel exposed. You expose the emotional leverage points others can use. People may not consciously exploit this, but they sense it. And sensing weakness changes how they treat you. This is the dark psychology most people never notice. They think they are being clear. They think they are being fair. They think they are being respectful. But beneath the surface, the interaction has shifted. The other person now feels entitled to judge your reasoning. And judgment creates hierarchy. The one who judges holds power. The one who explains yields it. This is why Machiavelli warned against unnecessary defense. Not because defense is immoral, but because it reverses positions. The moment you defend, you place yourself below the accuser, even if the accusation is absurd. Because now you are proving, and they are evaluating. This is why accusations are so powerful. An accusation does not need to be true to be effective. It only needs to provoke a response. Once you respond defensively, you have accepted the frame. The frame says you are on trial. And trials rarely favor the defendant. Most men walk into this trap daily without realizing it. They defend their choices to colleagues. They justify their boundaries to friends. They explain their silence to people who disrespected them. Each explanation chips away at authority. Not because the explanation is wrong, but because the need to explain is visible. And visibility is everything. Power operates through invisibility. The strongest moves are rarely announced. The strongest decisions are rarely debated publicly. The strongest men are rarely verbose. They let outcomes speak. Machiavelli understood that results silence questions far more effectively than arguments ever could. If you succeed, no one asks for justification. If you remain composed, no one challenges your frame. If you move forward calmly, others adjust around you. This is why explaining feels satisfying but costs you later. In the short term, explanation reduces tension. In the long term, it trains others to challenge you. Because every time you explain, you teach people that you are available for negotiation. And negotiation is power exchange. This does not mean silence in all situations. It means selective silence. The man who explains only when it serves his objective retains authority. The man who explains habitually gives it away. Most people explain emotionally, not strategically. They explain when they feel misunderstood. They explain when they feel judged. They explain when they feel pressure. This reveals the emotional trigger behind the behavior. And emotional triggers are readable. Machiavelli warned that once your emotions become visible, they can be manipulated. Not because others are malicious, but because human nature responds instinctively. If someone senses that challenging you makes you talk more, explain more, justify more, they will continue challenging you, consciously or not. Because the dynamic rewards them. They gain attention. They gain control of the pace. They gain psychological elevation. This is why the calm man frustrates manipulators. He does not rush to correct misunderstanding. He does not scramble to clear his name. He does not argue his worth. He allows ambiguity. Ambiguity is power. It keeps others guessing. It forces them to reveal intent. It prevents premature positioning. Machiavelli understood that clarity is not always an advantage. Sometimes, clarity arms your opponent. When you explain your motives, others learn how to counter them. When you justify your boundaries, others learn where they can push. The man who remains reserved keeps leverage. This is why silence has always unsettled people. Silence denies emotional feedback. Silence removes hooks. Silence breaks predictable patterns. People rely on reaction to orient themselves. When reaction is absent, they feel unstable. And instability shifts power. This is not cruelty. It is composure. You are not required to defend yourself in every interaction. In fact, defending yourself too often suggests that your sense of self depends on external approval. And dependency is visible. A man grounded in himself does not fear misinterpretation. He understands that those who matter will observe long enough to see the truth, and those who do not were never entitled to explanation. This is one of the hardest lessons. Because humans crave to be understood. But Machiavelli knew something harsh. Being understood is not the same as being respected. Often the opposite is true. When you make yourself too legible, too accessible, too transparent, you reduce mystery. And mystery commands attention. People lean toward what they cannot fully read. They project authority onto silence. They assume depth where explanation is absent. They hesitate where certainty is implied. This is why the most powerful figures in history spoke less than those around them. Not because they lacked ideas, but because they understood timing. Timing is power. Knowing when not to speak is often more important than knowing what to say. This chapter is not about becoming cold or detached. It is about choosing when your voice serves you, and when it serves others more. The man who explains reflexively serves the comfort of the listener. The man who withholds explanation serves his own position. Power requires discomfort. Not cruelty, but emotional independence. You must be willing to let others misunderstand you temporarily if it preserves long-term authority. This is difficult because it challenges ego. The ego wants validation now. Power prefers patience. Machiavelli wrote for rulers, but his insights apply to any man who wants psychological sovereignty. You cannot control how others interpret you, but you can control how much access they have to your inner reasoning. Restraint protects you. Because once words are spoken, they cannot be reclaimed. Once explanations are given, they cannot be unseen. People will use what you reveal, sometimes unintentionally. This is why power favors those who move quietly. They are harder to read, harder to predict, harder to challenge. This unpredictability creates caution, and caution creates respect. The man who explains everything invites familiarity, and familiarity dissolves authority. This is why leaders often become less respected when they overshare. Not because they are wrong, but because they collapse distance. Distance is not coldness. Distance is structure. Structure creates hierarchy. Hierarchy creates order. Order creates power. This is the lesson Machiavelli understood deeply. You do not gain power by convincing others of your rightness. You gain power by making your position unquestionable. And unquestionable positions are not argued, they are assumed. This is why calm presence beats articulate defense. This is why silence beats justification. This is why the man who does not explain controls the room. Not because he dominates, but because he does not submit. This chapter marks a shift. From reacting to observing. From explaining to positioning. From seeking approval to establishing presence. Once you internalize this, conversations change. You speak less, but when you speak, it carries weight. You respond slower, but your responses land harder. You stop defending, and others stop attacking. Not always immediately, but inevitably. Because power recognizes power. And the man who no longer explains himself has begun to understand it. Silence is not absence, it is pressure. Most people misunderstand silence. They believe silence is emptiness. They believe it is passivity. They believe it is the absence of confidence. Machiavelli understood silence differently. Silence is pressure without movement. It is the tension that fills a room when one man refuses to rush, refuses to react, refuses to explain himself into safety. Silence unsettles because it removes predictability. Human beings rely on signals to feel secure: tone, expression, reassurance, reaction. When those signals disappear, the mind begins to search for meaning. And in that search, power shifts. The silent man does not chase control. Control comes to him. Because silence forces others to move first. And whoever moves first reveals more than they intend. This is the core psychological truth behind silence. It transfers effort to the other person. When you speak constantly, you do the work of the interaction. When you remain silent, others work to fill the gap. They talk. They justify. They explain. They reveal. Silence creates asymmetry. One side is stable. The other is exposed. Machiavelli observed that those in power rarely hurry to speak. They allow others to exhaust themselves first. They allow emotions to surface. They allow mistakes to happen. Because information flows towards stillness. The man who remains calm becomes a reference point. The man who reacts becomes a variable. And power always prefers the constant over the variable. This is why silence feels intimidating. Not because it is aggressive, but because it cannot be read. Most men fear silence because it removes feedback. They do not know if they are approved of, rejected, ignored, or judged. That uncertainty triggers anxiety. And anxiety leads to concessions. This is how silence exerts pressure without force. It does not threaten. It does not demand. It waits. Waiting is power. The man who can wait controls the pace. The man who controls the pace controls the outcome. Machiavelli understood that speed is often mistaken for strength. But speed usually signals urgency. And urgency signals need. The man who needs nothing can afford silence. This is why silence often follows authority. Judges pause before speaking. Leaders delay responses. Powerful figures choose their words slowly. Not to appear thoughtful, but because they are not rushed by approval seeking. Their silence communicates one message clearly. I am not pressured by this moment. And that message changes the entire dynamic. People unconsciously adjust to it. They lower their tone. They reconsider their arguments. They soften their posture. Because silence elevates status. It creates vertical distance. The man who speaks constantly stays horizontal with everyone else. The man who speaks selectively rises above the noise. This is not arrogance. It is economy. Words are currency. Those who spend them carelessly reveal desperation. Those who spend them rarely signal value. Machiavelli warned against overexposure, not just in action, but in expression. The more visible your internal state becomes, the easier you are to manage. Silence conceals intent. And concealed intent is leverage. When people cannot read you, they hesitate. They question themselves. They slow down. They become cautious. Caution is respect in its earliest form. This is why silence has always been associated with power across cultures. Monks, kings, generals, philosophers, all understood that restraint creates gravity. Gravity does not move loudly. It pulls. And people feel it. The silent man becomes psychologically heavier. His presence occupies more space without demanding it. Others speak around him, not because he demands attention, but because they feel compelled to earn it. This is a crucial distinction. Power that demands is fragile. Power that attracts is durable. Silence attracts projection. People project intelligence onto quiet figures. They assume depth, calculation, authority, even when none has been claimed. This is not manipulation. It is a natural cognitive bias. The human brain fills gaps with assumptions. Silence creates gaps. And those gaps are filled with meaning. Machiavelli understood that letting others assume your strength is more effective than announcing it. Once you announce power, you invite challenge. Once power is assumed, challenge feels risky. This is why silence discourages confrontation. Not always consciously, but instinctively. The loud man invites debate. The silent man invites caution. This does not mean never speaking. It means speaking last. Speaking when clarity is required, not when emotion demands it. Silence is not withdrawal. It is positioning. You remain present, but unreactive. And presence without reaction is deeply unsettling. Because it denies emotional escalation. When someone attempts to provoke you and fails, the imbalance becomes visible. They feel exposed. You feel centered. And that contrast is power. Machiavelli warned that emotional reactions betray dependency. Anger shows that something touched you. Defense shows that something threatened you. Excessive explanation shows that something mattered too much. Silence shows independence. It communicates that your inner state is not governed by external pressure. This independence cannot be faked long-term. It must be cultivated. And it is cultivated through discipline. The discipline to pause. The discipline to breathe. The discipline to allow discomfort without fleeing it. Most men speak to relieve tension. The calm man allows tension to exist. Because tension works in his favor. In negotiations, silence causes the other side to concede prematurely. In conflict, silence forces the aggressor to escalate, or retreat. In social dynamics, silence filters attention. Only those worth engaging step closer. Everyone else drifts away. This is how silence protects energy. You stop wasting words on those who do not deserve access. Machiavelli understood that attention is finite. Giving attention indiscriminately devalues it. Silence conserves it. And conserved attention becomes authority. This is why powerful men often appear reserved, not because they lack warmth, but because they are selective. Selectivity signals value. And value commands respect. The man who speaks to everyone equally erodes hierarchy. The man who chooses when to speak establishes it. Hierarchy is not oppression. Hierarchy is structure. And structure stabilizes power. This chapter is about reclaiming silence, not as avoidance, but as presence. You are not disappearing. You are becoming solid. When you stop reacting immediately, people feel the shift. Conversations slow. Dynamics recalibrate. Others become more deliberate. Not because you demanded it, but because silence redefined the frame. This is why silence is dangerous in the wrong hands, and formidable in the right ones. It requires self-control. Without self-control, silence becomes passive aggression or fear. With self-control, silence becomes command. Machiavelli wrote for rulers because ruling begins internally. You cannot control outcomes if you cannot control impulse. Silence is impulse mastered. It is the visible proof of inner discipline. And discipline always outranks charisma. Charisma fades. Discipline compounds. This is the quiet advantage calm men possess. They are not louder. They are not faster. They are not more emotional. They are steadier. And steadiness is the rarest trait in a reactive world. When you master silence, you stop chasing influence. Influence comes to you. Because people instinctively follow what feels stable. And silence, when grounded, is stability made visible. Reputation is built before you arrive. Before you speak, you are already judged. Before you act, you are already measured. Before you explain, a conclusion has already been drawn. Machiavelli understood this uncomfortable truth. Reputation precedes reality. Not because people are unfair, but because the human mind is efficient. It categorizes quickly. It decides early. And once it decides, it defends that decision aggressively. This is why power is rarely won through explanation. It is won through consistency of presence. Most men believe reputation is something you say about yourself. It is not. Reputation is what remains when you are absent. It is what people expect from you before you enter the room. And expectation is power. If people expect strength, they interpret your silence as confidence. If people expect weakness, they interpret the same silence as fear. The behavior didn't change. The frame did. Machiavelli warned rulers that public perception is not shaped by intent, but by repetition. What people see consistently becomes truth, regardless of what is actually true. This is why erratic men are never trusted. They are unpredictable. And unpredictability destroys authority. Calm men, on the other hand, become familiar reference points. Their reactions are measured. Their energy stable. Their presence coherent. Over time, this coherence hardens into reputation. And once reputation forms, you stop needing to prove yourself. People fill in the blanks for you. This is the quiet power behind reputation. It saves effort. The man without reputation must constantly explain. The man with reputation is explained by others. This is not vanity. It is efficiency. Machiavelli observed that leaders who relied on speeches lost influence quickly. Leaders who relied on behavior accumulated it. Because behavior is harder to argue with. Words can be questioned. Actions can be debated. But patterns become beliefs. And beliefs shape how people respond to you. If you consistently remain calm under pressure, people expect composure from you. They stop testing you emotionally. They stop provoking recklessly. Not because they are afraid, but because their mind categorizes you as stable. Stability creates safety. And people orbit what feels safe and solid. This is how calm men attract authority without demanding it. They do not perform dominance. They do not assert superiority. They simply remain unchanged by chaos. Chaos exhausts most people. Those who are not exhausted by it become leaders by default. Reputation forms when your internal state becomes predictable. Not predictable in action, but predictable in control. People don't need to know what you'll do. They need to know you won't unravel. This is the foundation of silent power. Machiavelli knew that fear and love were unreliable tools. Both fluctuate. Both depend on emotion. But reputation, once established, outlives emotion. It becomes inertia. And inertia is hard to stop. This is why one emotional outburst can undo years of discipline. Not because the outburst was catastrophic, but because it contradicts the image. Contradiction destabilizes reputation. Consistency stabilizes it. Calm men protect their reputation by protecting their inner state. They do not vent publicly. They do not justify impulsively. They do not explain under pressure. They understand that every visible reaction becomes evidence. And evidence accumulates. This is why Machiavelli warned against overfamiliarity. The more people see of your unfiltered inner world, the less authority you retain. Not because vulnerability is wrong, but because exposure erodes mystique. Mystique is not deception. Mystique is restraint. It is choosing what not to reveal. Reputation thrives on restraint. The man who shares everything gives people nothing to imagine. The man who reveals selectively allows others to project strength, intelligence, and depth. And projection is a powerful force. People rarely see you as you are. They see you as they need you to be. The calm man allows that projection to work in his favor. He does not interrupt it with unnecessary clarification. This is why defending yourself publicly often damages reputation more than the accusation itself. The accusation introduces doubt. The defense confirms its importance. Machiavelli understood that attention legitimizes. When you rush to correct perception, you signal that perception matters more than your composure. And composure is the real currency. The man who maintains composure under misinterpretation communicates something stronger than innocence. He is not threatened. And what is not threatened appears powerful. Reputation is not built through perfection. It is built through predictable restraint. People forgive mistakes more easily than instability. A calm man can fail and recover. An emotional man fails repeatedly because he reacts to the failure. This is why reputation compounds. Every calm response strengthens it. Every controlled silence reinforces it. Eventually, people stop questioning. Not because you demanded respect, but because their experience with you supports it. This is the long game Machiavelli emphasized. Power that lasts is never rushed. It is layered. It is built interaction by interaction, reaction by reaction, silence by silence. This is also why calm men appear slow to the impatient. They are not slow. They are deliberate. Deliberation looks passive to those addicted to urgency. But urgency is a signal of lack. Those who feel they must act immediately often feel they are running out of leverage. The calm man never appears rushed. And what is not rushed appears in control. Reputation follows this logic naturally. People begin to consult you. They wait for your response. They measure the room by your reaction. Not because you demanded authority, but because your presence stabilized the environment. This is the highest form of power. Invisible leadership. Machiavelli knew that the most dangerous rivals are not the loud ones, but the quiet constants. They do not compete openly. They accumulate influence silently. By the time they are noticed, they are already positioned. This chapter is not about image crafting. It is about inner alignment. Reputation is the shadow your discipline casts. You cannot fake it for long. People sense incongruence quickly. But they also sense authenticity, especially calm authenticity. This is why calm men are often underestimated early, and dominant later. They do not announce themselves. They let time speak. And time is the most persuasive ally. If you want reputation, stop managing perception directly. Manage your reactions. Manage your pace. Manage your silence. Reputation will follow automatically. Because people trust what remains consistent under pressure. And consistency under pressure is rare. That rarity becomes authority. Emotion is the open gate. Every power struggle begins in the same place. Not with words. Not with action. But with emotion. Machiavelli understood something most men never learn. Whoever controls your emotions controls your options. Emotion narrows perception. It accelerates reaction. It collapses patience. And once patience is gone, power leaks. Most men believe emotion makes them human. They are right. But Machiavelli was not interested in what makes men human. He was interested in what makes them predictable. And emotion is the most reliable predictor of behavior. Anger wants immediate release. Fear wants immediate safety. Desire wants immediate gratification. Pride wants immediate validation. None of these care about long-term outcomes. This is why emotionally driven men are easy to outmaneuver. Not because they are weak, but because they are transparent. Their inner state announces itself through posture, tone, urgency, and reaction. The calm man reveals nothing. And what cannot be read cannot be rushed. Machiavelli warned that visible emotion invites manipulation, not necessarily from malicious people, but from circumstances themselves. When you react emotionally, the situation sets your tempo. When you remain calm, you set it. Tempo is power. The man who dictates the pace dictates the direction. This is why calm men appear difficult, distant, or cold to emotional people. They do not respond on cue. They do not escalate when expected. They do not offer emotional closure. And this creates imbalance. The emotional man wants resolution. The calm man wants clarity. Clarity always outlasts urgency. Emotion pulls attention inward. Calmness keeps attention outward. This is a critical distinction. An emotional man is consumed by how he feels. A calm man observes what is happening. Observation creates options. Reaction eliminates them. Machiavelli understood that power is rarely lost through force, but often through emotional miscalculation. A ruler who reacts to insult loses dignity. A leader who reacts to fear loses authority. A man who reacts to praise loses independence. Because reaction hands control outward. Calmness pulls it back in. This does not mean suppressing emotion. Suppression creates pressure. Pressure leaks. The calm man does not suppress, he contains. He allows emotion to exist without allowing it to command. This is discipline. And discipline is visible. People sense it immediately. They feel that they cannot easily move you. And what cannot be moved becomes a fixed point. Fixed points attract alignment. This is why emotionally stable men often become informal leaders, even without status. Others look to them for cues. Not because they speak louder, but because they remain unchanged. Emotional volatility creates noise. Calmness creates signal. Machiavelli observed that people trust those who are least shaken by circumstance. Because stability feels protective. And protection feels powerful. This is also why emotional men are often exhausted. They are constantly reacting to internal fluctuations triggered by external events. The calm man expends less energy. He chooses when to engage. This choice is power. Emotional reactions feel honest, but honesty without restraint becomes exposure. Exposure reduces leverage. The more people know about your emotional triggers, the easier it is to influence your behavior, intentionally or not. The calm man does not advertise his triggers. He studies them privately. He learns where emotion arises, and trains himself to pause there. That pause is everything. In that pause, reaction dies. In that pause, perspective returns. In that pause, control is reclaimed. Most power is won in that pause. Machiavelli did not advocate cruelty, he advocated clarity under pressure. The ability to remain unaffected is not inhuman. It is strategic. When others panic, the calm man gains information. When others rush, he sees consequences. When others escalate, he de-escalates internally. And the situation bends toward him. Emotion also creates attachment. Attachment creates dependency. And dependency destroys authority. The man who needs emotional validation cannot lead. Because he is always listening for approval. The calm man listens for reality. Reality is quieter. But it is honest. This is why emotionally disciplined men are often misunderstood. They are accused of not caring. In truth, they care deeply, but selectively. They choose where emotion belongs. They do not donate it to every interaction. This selectivity preserves strength. Machiavelli understood that indiscriminate emotional engagement dilutes power. Engage everything, and nothing matters. Choose carefully, and everything counts. This chapter is not about becoming cold. It is about becoming unreachable by chaos. When someone insults you and you remain calm, you gain position. When someone praises you and you remain grounded, you gain independence. When something goes wrong and you remain steady, you gain authority. Authority does not announce itself. It emerges when others notice that events affect you less than they affect them. That asymmetry is power. Emotion equalizes. Calmness separates. This separation is not arrogance. It is containment. The calm man does not float above others, he anchors beneath them. And anchors hold. Machiavelli understood that rulers who displayed emotional excess lost credibility quickly. Not because they felt, but because they showed they could be moved. And what can be moved can be pushed. This is why calm men are hard to intimidate. Not because they are fearless, but because fear does not control their behavior. Fear may exist, but it does not drive. This distinction is everything. Emotional mastery is not about eliminating feeling. It is about delaying response until feeling no longer dictates outcome. This delay creates power, because it reintroduces choice. Choice is freedom, and freedom is the foundation of all authority. If you want power, begin here. Not with strategy, not with dominance, not with image, but with emotional containment. Because the man who governs himself cannot be governed easily by others. Never react first. Reaction feels natural. It feels honest. It feels decisive. It feels strong. Machiavelli understood that reaction is none of these things. Reaction is submission to timing you did not choose. The man who reacts first gives away his position. He reveals what touched him. He reveals what mattered. He reveals where pressure landed. And once pressure finds the surface, it can be applied again. This is why calm men hesitate, not from fear, but from calculation. They understand that the first reaction in any interaction is rarely the strongest one. It is usually the most exposed. Most men react because silence feels unbearable. A challenge appears. An accusation lands. A provocation surfaces. And the body demands release. Words rush forward. Tone sharpens. Posture stiffens. In that moment, power is lost. Because the situation has taken control of the man. Machiavelli observed that those who rush to respond are trying to regain comfort, not authority. Comfort seeks relief. Authority seeks position. The calm man chooses position. By not reacting immediately, he forces the other side to continue. And continuation reveals intention. People reveal themselves when they are not interrupted. They escalate. They repeat. They overexplain. They contradict. All information. All leverage. The calm man collects this quietly. He lets the other side spend energy. Energy spent cannot be recovered. This creates asymmetry. One side is still. The other is depleted. And depletion weakens judgment. This is why patience feels like strength to observers. Not because nothing is happening, but because something is happening internally. The calm man is not passive. He is watching. He is timing. He is allowing the situation to expose its shape. Reaction collapses complexity into impulse. Patience expands complexity into clarity. Machiavelli warned rulers against quick retaliation, not because retaliation is wrong, but because premature action blinds. Blind action creates unintended consequences. And unintended consequences weaken authority. The man who reacts first often regrets later. The man who waits rarely does. Waiting creates psychological pressure. Silence after provocation unsettles. It forces the other person to question whether they miscalculated. They expected resistance. They expected defense. They expected emotion. Instead, they get nothing. That nothing becomes loud. Their mind fills it with doubt. And doubt erodes confidence. This is how calm men reverse power dynamics without confrontation. They do not escalate. They let the other side escalate alone. An escalation without opposition looks irrational. This is a subtle truth Machiavelli understood deeply. Power does not need to appear aggressive. It only needs to remain unmoved. The man who does not react communicates one thing clearly. You have not reached me. And what cannot be reached cannot be controlled. This does not mean ignoring everything. It means choosing when to engage. Timing is power. A delayed response is often more decisive than an immediate one. Because delay signals choice. Choice signals authority. The man who reacts instantly appears compelled. The man who responds later appears sovereign. Machiavelli knew that sovereignty begins with temporal control. Who controls the moment controls the meaning. This is why calm men often respond with fewer words. They do not waste energy. They deliver precision. Precision lands harder than volume. Reaction speaks in paragraphs. Authority speaks in sentences. And sometimes, Authority speaks in silence. The refusal to react immediately also protects you from traps. Provocations are designed to trigger emotion. Once triggered, logic disappears. You say things you cannot retract. You reveal priorities you did not intend to share. You concede ground unconsciously. The calm man avoids this by delaying engagement. He does not step into the trap. He watches who set it. This awareness shifts power immediately. Because awareness is advantage. Most conflicts are won before words are exchanged. They are won in posture, pace, and restraint. The man who reacts first accepts the opponent's frame. The man who waits forces a new one. This is why calm men appear difficult to deal with. They do not follow scripts. They do not provide predictable reactions. And unpredictability, when grounded in control, is intimidating. People prefer opponents they can read. The calm man cannot be read easily. This creates hesitation. And hesitation creates opportunity. Machiavelli understood that hesitation is contagious. When one man pauses, others begin to second guess. Their confidence weakens. Their posture shifts. Their voice changes. All without a single word exchanged. This is silent dominance. Not domination, but influence. The calm man does not need to overpower. He allows others to overpower themselves. This chapter is not about winning arguments. It is about owning timing. When you slow down, you gain perspective. When you gain perspective, you see leverage. When you see leverage, force becomes unnecessary. This is the elegance of restraint. The world teaches men to react fast. Power teaches men to react last. If you remember one thing from this chapter, remember this. The first reaction is rarely the right one. And the man who waits long enough often discovers he doesn't need to react at all. The gravity of calm. Power does not always move toward the loudest voice. Often, it moves toward the stillest presence. Machiavelli understood that influence behaves like gravity. It does not announce itself. It does not rush outward. It pulls, slowly, inevitably, toward what feels stable. This is why calm men become reference points. Not because they demand attention. Not because they dominate conversation. But because they remain unchanged while everything else shifts. Human beings are instinctively drawn to stability. In uncertainty, people look for anchors. In chaos, they seek structure. In emotional turbulence, they search for calm. The man who provides that calm, without effort, becomes central. This is not leadership by command. It is leadership by contrast. When everyone else reacts, the calm man stands out. When others rush, he waits. When emotions flare, he remains grounded. That difference creates psychological weight. People begin to notice him without realizing why. They measure their reactions against his. They wait for his response before committing theirs. They adjust their tone when addressing him. This is how authority forms organically. Machiavelli knew that true power does not chase followers. It creates conditions where following feels natural. Calm men create those conditions by being predictable and control. Predictability is often misunderstood as weakness. In truth, predictability of composure is strength. People do not need to know what you will decide. They need to know you will decide without panic. This assurance is rare. Most people are ruled by internal fluctuations, mood, stress, validation, fear. Their behavior shifts daily. The calm man's inner state remains consistent. That consistency becomes reliable. And reliability becomes trust. Trust becomes influence. Influence becomes power. All without asking. This is why calm men often rise quietly. They are underestimated early because they do not compete visibly. They do not announce ambition. They do not assert dominance. They do not perform confidence. They embody it. Machiavelli observed that those who seek power openly attract resistance. Those who accumulate it silently attract alignment. Alignment feels voluntary. People tell themselves they chose it. In reality, they were pulled. This pull is psychological gravity. The calm man does not need to convince. He simply exists steadily enough that others recalibrate around him. This recalibration is subtle. Conversations slow when he speaks. Arguments soften when he listens. Decisions pause until his reaction is seen. Not because he demanded it, but because people trust his stability more than their impulse. This is the silent hierarchy Machiavelli understood well. Hierarchy forms wherever some people are emotionally reactive and others are not. The emotionally reactive orbit the emotionally stable. Always. Because emotional stability feels like safety. And safety creates loyalty. This does not mean calm men are passive. They are decisive, but not impulsive. They move when movement matters. This selectivity amplifies impact. When a calm man finally speaks, people listen. Not because the words are louder, but because they are rare. Scarcity creates value. And value commands attention. Machiavelli warned against constant engagement. The man who is always available becomes background noise. The man who is selectively present becomes significant. Calm men understand this intuitively. They do not overexplain. They do not overpromise. They do not overreact. Their restraint becomes their signature. And signature creates recognition. People begin to say things like, "He doesn't panic. He's steady. He thinks before he speaks." These statements are not compliments. They are acknowledgments of authority. Authority does not need praise. It needs recognition. Calm men receive recognition because their behavior reduces uncertainty for others. Uncertainty creates stress. Stress seeks relief. Calm provides relief. This is why people unconsciously move closer to calm figures. They want proximity to stability. Machiavelli understood that rulers who appeared emotionally volatile lost support quickly. Not because they made bad decisions, but because people feared unpredictability. Fear erodes loyalty. Calmness strengthens it. This chapter is not about becoming emotionless. It is about becoming emotionally reliable. Others should know that when pressure rises, you remain intact. That knowledge changes how they treat you. They stop testing you. They stop provoking you. They stop doubting your judgment. Not because you threatened them, but because your past behavior taught them what to expect. Reputation turns into gravity. Gravity does not argue. It pulls. This is why calm men rarely need to assert status. Status asserts itself around them. They become the standard others reference unconsciously. This is the quiet apex Machiavelli hinted at. Power without display. Influence without effort. Authority without demand. It begins with internal regulation. It grows through consistency. And it culminates in gravity. If you want to lead, be steady. If you want influence, be calm. If you want power, be unchanged by chaos. Because in a reactive world, the unreactive man becomes the center. Absence is a form of pressure. Most men believe power is maintained through presence. They think visibility equals relevance. They think constant engagement equals influence. They think disappearance equals loss. Machiavelli understood the opposite. Absence magnifies value. What is always available becomes ordinary. What is occasionally unavailable becomes important. This is not a trick of ego, it is a law of perception. The human mind assigns value based on contrast. When something is present constantly, it fades into the background. When it withdraws unexpectedly, it becomes noticeable. Absence creates space. And space invites attention. The calm man understands when to step back. Not out of fear. Not out of weakness. But out of control. He knows that staying too long dilutes authority. Influence, like gravity, requires distance to be felt. Machiavelli observed that rulers who lingered too openly lost mystique. Their presence became routine. Their authority softened. But those who appeared selectively, those who withdrew strategically, retained power. Because withdrawal forces recalculation. People begin to ask questions. Where did he go? Why hasn't he responded? What does this mean? Those questions shift attention toward you, without you doing anything. This is silent leverage. Absence activates imagination. And imagination is stronger than explanation. When you are absent, others fill the gap with assumptions. If your reputation is solid, those assumptions favor you. If your presence has been calm, composed, and consistent, your absence feels deliberate. Deliberate absence communicates confidence. It signals that you are not dependent on the moment. Dependency weakens authority. Detachment strengthens it. This is why calm men never chase attention. They allow attention to come to them, on their terms. They do not rush to reply. They do not insert themselves unnecessarily. They do not stay where they are no longer adding value. They leave. And in leaving, they elevate. Machiavelli understood that disappearance is often more unsettling than confrontation. Confrontation gives clarity. Absence gives uncertainty. Uncertainty forces others to think. Thinking slows reactions. Slower reactions reduce impulsive power grabs. This is how absence stabilizes position. When others are unsure of your availability, they become cautious. They hesitate to overstep. They hesitate to provoke. They hesitate to assume. This hesitation protects your authority. The man who is always present must constantly manage perception. The man who withdraws allows perception to manage itself. Absence is not avoidance. It is timing. The calm man withdraws after impact, not before. He leaves once value has been established. Leaving too early creates irrelevance. Leaving too late creates familiarity. Power exists in the balance. Machiavelli warned against exhausting your influence. Every interaction spends currency. The wise man spends selectively. Absence preserves resources. Energy. Attention. Reputation. This preservation compounds. People begin to associate your presence with importance. Because it is rare. Scarcity creates respect. Respect creates authority. Authority does not need presence to be felt. It lingers. This is why calm men can leave a room and still influence decisions. Their earlier restraint continues working. This chapter is not about disappearing dramatically. It is about knowing when not to engage. Not every situation deserves your presence. Not every conflict deserves your response. Not every moment deserves your energy. The calm man understands this hierarchy. He chooses silence. He chooses distance. He chooses patience. And in choosing, he controls. Machiavelli understood that power expands when others miss you. Not emotionally, but structurally. When systems must adjust to your absence, your importance becomes visible. People reorganize. They compensate. They account for you. That accounting is influence. The man who is absent by choice is never forgotten. The man who is present by need is quickly dismissed. This is the paradox of power. Less engagement often produces more effect. Absence sharpens edges. It restores mystique. It forces others to confront your value indirectly. And indirect influence lasts longer. If you want leverage, stop overexposing yourself. Let your presence mean something. Let your absence mean more. Because the calm man does not need to be everywhere. He needs to be felt. Let others expose themselves. Most men believe power comes from action. They believe confrontation clarifies truth. They believe pressure reveals character. They believe force accelerates outcomes. Machiavelli understood something quieter, and far more dangerous. People reveal themselves when you do nothing. Action interrupts exposure. Reaction conceals weakness. Silence allows it to surface naturally. The calm man does not interrogate. He waits. And waiting creates space. In that space, people speak too much. They justify unnecessarily. They contradict themselves. They show urgency where none was required. All of this is information. Machiavelli observed that men rarely hide who they are for long, unless someone rushes them. When rushed, people become defensive. When defended, they become careful. When careful, they conceal. But when allowed to continue freely, they unravel. The calm man understands this. He resists the urge to correct. He resists the urge to challenge. He resists the urge to dominate. Because domination stops the flow. Exposure requires comfort. Silence provides it. When someone speaks into silence, they feel compelled to fill it. They assume the quiet man needs clarification. They assume they must persuade. They assume they must impress. In doing so, they overshare. Oversharing is vulnerability disguised as confidence. This is how the calm man learns. He does not extract information aggressively. He lets it come to him. This patience creates asymmetry. One side reveals. The other observes. And observation creates advantage. Machiavelli understood that knowing someone's nature is more powerful than defeating them openly. Once you understand a person's fears, desires, and patterns, confrontation becomes unnecessary. They will move predictably. And predictability is control. This is why calm men rarely interrupt. Interruption is impatience. Impatience signals insecurity. The man who is secure in his position does not need to rush clarity. He already has leverage, time. Time exposes what pressure cannot. People eventually contradict themselves when given enough space. They reveal priorities through what they emphasize. They reveal fears through what they avoid. They reveal ego through what they repeat. The calm man listens for these patterns. He does not confront them immediately. He stores them. Machiavelli warned against premature judgment. Judgment ends observation. Once you judge, you stop watching. And when you stop watching, you miss leverage. This is why calm men appear neutral, even when they are not. Neutrality keeps the other person talking. Talking reveals structure. Structure reveals weakness. Weakness does not need to be attacked. It can be avoided, redirected, or outlasted. The calm man prefers these outcomes. Because force creates resistance. Exposure creates inevitability. People often expose themselves by trying to control perception. They overemphasize competence. They insist on loyalty. They demand validation. All signs of insecurity. The calm man does not react to these signals. He notes them. Because insecurity drives behavior more reliably than logic. Machiavelli understood that emotional needs are predictable. Those who crave validation will seek it. Those who fear loss will overprotect. Those who desire control will overreach. The calm man allows these tendencies to surface. He does not interfere. This patience disarms conflict before it begins. When others expose themselves, you no longer need to guess. You can choose distance, alignment, or disengagement. Choice is power. This chapter is not about manipulation. It is about restraint. Restraint keeps the environment honest. When you stop managing interactions aggressively, people show you who they are. And once you see clearly, you rarely need to act forcefully. Machiavelli understood that the greatest mistakes are made by those who act without understanding. Understanding requires time. Time requires patience. Patience requires self-control. This chain leads to dominance, not visible dominance, but strategic superiority. The calm man does not rush to expose others publicly. Public exposure creates enemies. Private understanding creates options. Options are power. This is why calm men often appear detached. They are not detached from reality. They are detached from impulse. And detachment preserves clarity. Clarity dissolves confusion. Confusion benefits no one except those who thrive on chaos. The calm man thrives on clarity. He allows situations to mature. He lets people reveal priorities through repetition. He watches who grows uncomfortable in silence. Discomfort reveals insecurity. And insecurity drives mistakes. This is the quiet advantage. While others rush to act, the calm man learns. While others escalate, he accumulates insight. While others expose themselves through urgency, he remains unreadable. Unreadability protects position. And protected position becomes power. If you remember one principle from this chapter, remember this. You do not need to expose anyone. Give them space. They will do it themselves. Control the pace, control the outcome. Everything bends to pace. Arguments. Negotiations. relationships, power itself. Machiavelli understood that control is rarely seized, it is granted to whoever moves slowest under pressure. The man who rushes is reacting. The man who slows down is deciding. And decision is power. Most men lose not because they are weak, but because they are hurried. They speak too soon. They commit too early. They respond before understanding the terrain. Speed feels like confidence. In reality, speed is often anxiety in disguise. The calm man moves differently. He does not resist urgency, he ignores it. Because urgency is usually someone else's problem. When others rush you, they are revealing dependence. They want resolution. They want closure. They want control. The calm man gives none of it immediately. He stretches time. And time changes leverage. Machiavelli knew that whoever controls timing controls meaning. Delay forces reconsideration. Delay creates doubt. Delay exposes desperation. The man who can delay without discomfort holds the advantage. This is why calm men rarely feel cornered. They do not allow situations to collapse into immediacy. They expand the moment. Expansion creates options. Options eliminate fear. Fear is the enemy of power. Most power mistakes happen under compression. Compressed time leads to emotional decisions. Emotional decisions lead to irreversible consequences. The calm man avoids compression. He slows conversations. He pauses before answering. He resists deadlines that do not serve him. Not openly. Not aggressively. But quietly. His pace signals independence. Independence commands respect. When you do not mirror urgency, you break rhythm. And broken rhythm disrupts control. This is why negotiators fear silence. This is why provocateurs fear calm. This is why manipulators fear patience. Because patience cannot be rushed. Machiavelli understood that the man who sets the tempo shapes the battlefield. Fast tempo favors impulse. Slow tempo favors calculation. The calm man always chooses calculation. He understands that not every moment requires action. Sometimes restraint is the action. This restraint confuses opponents. They do not know when, or if, you will move. That uncertainty protects you. It keeps others cautious. Caution reduces aggression. Aggression without clarity destroys itself. This is the quiet endgame. Power does not explode. It settles. It solidifies. It becomes unquestioned. By the time others realize who controls the pace, it is too late. The calm man is already positioned. This chapter completes the philosophy. You have seen the pattern. Silence creates pressure. Calm creates gravity. Absence creates value. Patience reveals weakness. Pace decides outcome. None of this requires force. None of this requires cruelty. All of it requires discipline. Self-mastery is the source. Machiavelli never argued that men should dominate others recklessly. He argued that men who cannot govern themselves will always be governed. This entire system, calm, silence, restraint, timing, is not about controlling people. It is about becoming uncontrollable. Unshaken. Unrushed. Unreadable. The world pressures constantly. It demands reaction. It demands emotion. It demands explanation. The calm man refuses. And in that refusal, he becomes powerful. This is the final truth. Those who move fast chase outcomes. Those who move slow shape them. If you control your pace, nothing can force your hand. If nothing can force your hand, you are free. And freedom is the highest form of power. Final words. This was never about dominance. It was about discipline. It was never about manipulation. It was about clarity. It was never about intimidation. It was about stillness under pressure. That is the secret Machiavelli understood. And now, you understand it too.